Welcome to your first flipped video lesson. You will watch this and use this as notes in lieu of notes, in addition to what we take in class as well. But you do this at home. Beginning in the 1300s, a number of changes took place in Europe, enabling Europeans to begin sending ships into the Atlantic Ocean to look for a route to China. Got to find those spices. We also have an intellectual revolution known as the Renaissance, which began in Western Europe, mainly in Italy is where it started, around AD 1350, and did last until about the year 1600. It produced great works of art, and it started a scientific revolution, which allowed many changes to take place in Europe. By the early 1400s, Europeans had acquired new technologies to make long-distance travel possible. They had learned how to use things like an astrolabe, which was a device that uses the position of the sun to determine direction, latitude, and local time. And they acquired the compass. They know which way is north and south. Hey, that's great. So they also, more importantly, started to build ships that were capable of traveling long distances. Okay, the Portuguese invented a ship called the caravel, which a ship that made travel much faster. So the Portuguese started traveling up and down the African coast, in which they came into contact with different African empires. Okay, so some of these African empires would take slaves. Okay, and this is with the very beginning of the slave trade. Slavery and sugar. So slavery existed in African society. Okay, most enslaved people had been captured in war, and they were either sold back to their people or absorbed into their new African society. African slavery changed when Arabs began to trade for enslaved Africans. In the early 1400s, the Akan people acquired enslaved Africans from Mali traders to clear the land and mine gold. The Spanish and Portuguese purchased enslaved Africans to work on sugar plantations. Then sugarcane cultivation. This requires heavy manual labor and a large labor force. So Europeans used enslaved workers to do this. So in the 1400s, Spain and Portugal set up plantations off the west coast of Africa and used enslaved Africans to work the fields. Okay, so eventually, as you've learned about many times before, the Europeans start to spread out and look for different places. Columbus expands. He travels west trying to find China because nobody knows that North America is there. Quote unquote, nobody knows it's there. So they discover South and North America, and what ensues is called the Columbian Exchange, which was a series of interchanges that permanently changed the world's ecosystems and changed nearly every culture around the world. We are still seeing the effects of these changes today, even though that happened almost 600 years ago. Okay, so Native Americans, they helped teach the Europeans local farming methods and introduced them to new crops and foods such as corn, tobacco, and the potato, which we learned about in world history last year. Europeans also adopted many devices invented by Native Americans, such as the canoe. Europeans introduced the Native Americans to many crops such as wheat, oats, and barley, and how to domesticate livestock. Europeans also introduced the Native Americans to technologies such as metalworking, which the Native Americans had not yet really gotten into. Europeans brought diseases also, unfortunately, that killed millions of Native Americans because they lacked immunity to these diseases. Okay, so the Spanish, they expand into Mexico. They conquer the Aztecs, they conquer the Inca in South America. Okay, and so they set up a society, Spanish-American society. So most conquistadors, the main motive for coming to America was to acquire wealth and prestige. Although the Spanish did not find vast deposits of gold in the Americas, they did discover huge deposits of silver. Mining camps emerged all across northern Mexico. So to feed the miners, the Spaniards created large ranches for their herds of cattle and sheep. These ranches were called haciendas. The men who worked the ranches were called vaqueros. Now, cowhands in the United States later adopted many of the ways of the vaqueros. Let's see here. Now, Spanish colonial society operated on the system of the encomienda. I can't pronounce Spanish very well, sorry. Where encomienderos were granted control over Native American towns. The people in the Spanish colonies in the Americas formed a highly structured society. A person's position in society was determined by birth, income, and education. So the highest level of society under Spanish consisted of the peninsulars. Those were born in Spain. Okay. Below this level were the criollos, those born in the colonies to Spanish parents. And then next were the mestizos, those born of Spanish and Native American heritage. The lowest level of society included Native Americans, Africans, and the people of mixed Spanish and African or African and Native American ancestry. The Spanish king divided the empire in America into regions which he called viceroyalties. A viceroy ruled each region as a representative of the king. Okay, so the Spanish weren't the only ones getting involved. You also have the French and later the English. And we're going to talk about the English at a little later point here in a different video. But we'll talk about the French Empire right now in America. So the French, they came to America around 1524. The French king sent Giovanni de Verrazano to map the North American coastline. The king was interested in finding what was called the Northwest Passage, which was the northern watering route from North America to the Pacific Ocean. Although Verrazano found no such passage, he did map a large area of North America's east coast. Jacques Cartier, another explorer, discovered and mapped the St. Lawrence River. In 1602, the French king authorized a group of merchants to establish colonies. The merchants, who hoped to build a fur trade with Native Americans, hired geographer Samuel de Champlain to help them colonize North America. I got lost. Where am I at? Sorry about that. Champlain established the city of Quebec, which became the capital of the new colony of New France. New France was founded for the fur trade. That's primarily what they were looking for. They weren't really looking for gold so much. Settlers were not needed to clear land or start farms. Consequently, the population under New France grew very slowly. So most of the fur traders did not even live in the colony, but among the Native Americans with whom they traded. In 1663, New France became a royal colony. The French government then introduced a series of projects designed to increase the colony's population. And the French also began exploring North America a lot more. So Louis Joliet and Jacques Marquette explored the Mississippi River, coming down past St. Louis, current-day St. Louis. And finally, René Robert Cavelier de La Salle then followed the river to the Gulf of Mexico and claimed the region, which he named Louisiana for France. Okay, hey, there it is. That's your first video of the year. It covers kind of those notes over Native Americans and those first couple days on Monday and Tuesday, Make sure you have your video done. There will be a short quiz over these, probably on Edmodo. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Sorry for the length.